Welcome to The Deep Dive, a 3F Network podcast. We take your sources and, we kind of boil them down,
Yeah.
to those little golden nuggets of knowledge. And today I'm Brendan Gonzalez-Willie, and we're diving into Anton Chekhov's At Christmas Time.
Uh-huh.
I think you're going to find it's a story that sticks with you.
Yeah, it's one of those that you think about for a while after you finish it. I'm Shannon Williams-Bevy, by the way. I'm excited for this deep dive.
So Chekhov, he was a master storyteller, but he was also a doctorine.
Right.
And that kind of comes through in his work, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He was a fascinating figure, lived in Russia, late 19th century, and he was incredibly prolific. I mean, he wrote short stories, plays, even worked as a journalist. But what I find really interesting is how his medical background, you can really see how it influenced his work, you know what I mean? He had this incredible ability to observe human behavior, to see beneath the surface and capture those small details that reveal so much about people, those little things.
Yeah, I know what you mean, like those little mannerisms and stuff. Yeah, and you could definitely see that at Christmas time. This story, well, it takes place during the holidays in a small Russian village. And it really centers around this older couple, Vasilisa and Pyotr.
Yeah.
And they're just desperate to connect with their daughter, Yefimia, who moved to St. Petersburg after getting married.
Yeah, and that longing to connect with her, it's really at the heart of this whole story, They haven't heard from her in years. I mean years. And they're just so eager for any news. But there's this catch. They're illiterate.
So they can't read or write.
Right.
So that's where that tavern scene comes in, right?
You got it.
They find this former soldier, Yegor, who can write for them.
Exactly. And this scene, well, it's so much more than just a plot device. Chekhov, he uses it to paint this really vivid picture of village life. Like, you can practically feel the heat of the stove, you can smell the pork sizzling, you can hear the scratch of Yegor's pen, on the paper. It's almost like you're right there in the tavern with them.
I know. It's really immersive, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what really stood out to you about that scene?
Well, to me, it's immediately clear that there's this huge contrast between the old couple and Yegor, like their heartfelt desire to connect with their daughter. And then you have Igor's kind of rough, almost indifferent approach. Like, he's just there for a quick ruble. He's not really invested in their emotional needs.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to care too much.
Right.
And the way that Chekhov uses dialogue to highlight this disconnect, it's brilliant.
It really is.
Like the old couple, you can tell they want to just pour out their hearts to tell Yefimia everything about their lives.
Yeah.
Just all the details. But then what comes out through Yegor is this stiff, like really formal letter full of cliches and these empty phrases.
Yeah.
It's just, it's kind of sad, actually.
It is sad.
Like when he starts going on about military regulations.
Yeah.
And the dangers of Bacchus, it's so out of place.
It's almost comical, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of funny, but also really sad at the same time.
Exactly. I think that's intentional. Chekhov uses humor to highlight how absurd this situation really is, but he also uses it to, emphasize the tragedy of this whole communication breakdown. I mean, they're trying so hard to express their love and longing for their daughter, but their words are just getting lost in translation.
Yeah, it's like their letter, it's just destined to fail from the very beginning.
That's a really interesting way to put it. And it makes you think about, well, maybe Chekhov's hinting at the challenges of communication in general, like not just between individuals, but across social classes as well. Remember, Yegor is a former soldier, likely of a lower social standing than the old couple. So he's bringing his own perspective and biases to the letter.
That's a great point. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, it adds another layer of complexity to their already difficult situation.
Definitely. So we have this letter that, despite the old couple's best intentions, ends up feeling, kind of detached and impersonal.
Right.
Where do we go from here?
Well, this kind of sets the stage for the second part of the story, which takes place in St. Petersburg on New Year's Day, where we meet Yefimia's husband, Andrei Hersonovich.
Right. And he works as a porter at this fancy hydropathic establishment, right?
That's right. And Chekhov really goes to great lengths to describe Andrei's appearance. His new uniform, his polite greetings to the guests. But there's this sense that it's all a bit superficial, like a carefully constructed facade.
So while the parents are struggling to express themselves authentically, the husband seems overly concerned with appearances.
Yes, exactly. And it becomes even more striking when we learn that Andrei's actually been intercepting Yefimia's letters to her parents.
He's been what?
He's been preventing them from ever even reaching their destination.
So he's actively keeping them apart? That's messed up. Why would he do that?
It's a great question, and honestly one that Chekhov doesn't explicitly answer. But this act of withholding, it really reveals a lot about, well, the power dynamics in their marriage. It raises questions about what their relationship is really like.
Wow. So we have these parallel storylines then. The parents who are just longing to connect with their daughter, Yefimia, who seems trapped in this marriage that seems more about appearances than genuine affection. And then you have Andrei, who's actively preventing any communication between them.
That's it. That's exactly it. And it's this web of missed connections and unspoken emotions that creates such a powerful sense of tension and longing throughout the story.
Yeah, there's a lot going on under the surface, isn't there?
Definitely.
And it's interesting how Chekhov uses these contrasting settings, the simple village and then bustling St. Petersburg, to emphasize this divide, between these characters and their worlds.
It's really clever. It highlights the different values and experiences that shape their lives. The village, it represents tradition, community, a slower pace of life. But St. Petersburg embodies, modernity, ambition, a focus on social status. And Yefimia is caught between these two worlds, and she seems to be yearning for something, but she can't quite articulate it. I think something a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
It's like she doesn't know what she wants, but she knows that she's not happy.
Exactly. And this brings us to a pivotal moment in the story, when Yefimia finally receives a letter, and it's the one written by Yegor, no less. And it evokes such a powerful emotional response from her.
Yeah, that's a big moment.
This scene, it's just heartbreaking, but it's also beautiful. She's just overwhelmed with joy. She's kissing her children. She starts describing village life in such vivid detail. It's as if she's transported back to her childhood, and you really feel how much she misses her family and the life that she left behind.
Yeah, and then she cries out, "Queen of Heaven, take us away from here." That line always gets me.
Oh, I know. It's just so powerful. It really reveals how unhappy she is in St. Petersburg and how much she yearns for something more.
It's like a cry for help almost.
Yeah, like she needs to escape, to go back to a place where she feels loved and understood. But of course, her husband is completely oblivious. He's too preoccupied with his work and maintaining his social standing.
It's just sad to see how her emotional needs are being completely ignored, especially considering, well, how much effort her parents went through just to send her a simple letter.
It's a really poignant moment, and it kind of speaks to that recurring theme in Chekhov's work, the disconnect between appearances and reality. On the surface, Andrei seems respectable, hardworking, but underneath there's this coldness, this lack of empathy for his wife's feelings.
Yeah, he's all about appearances.
Right.
And this contrast is highlighted even more when you see the general and his, kind of obsession with the Charcot douche.
Oh, yes. Every day, the general asks Andrei about this medical treatment, and it really reveals his own, absent-mindedness and his superficiality. He's more focused on just the name of the treatment than its actual purpose or benefits.
He just likes the sound of it.
Yeah, maybe.
And then there's Andrei, always ready with the prompt mechanical response, further emphasizing his focus on outward appearances and formalities. It's all just a performance, another example of style over substance.
I see what you mean.
So what do you make of this juxtaposition? We've got the lost letters. You've got Yefimia's emotional outburst. And then you've got the general's obsession with this Charcot douche. It seems like Chekhov is weaving this really complex tapestry here.
He absolutely is. And it's important to remember that Chekhov was a master of subtlety and symbolism. He rarely spells things out for the reader, He wants us to do some work. He creates layers of meaning that we have to unravel ourselves. It's fascinating, isn't it? We have these lost letters, a daughter who's yearning for something more, a husband who seems detached, and then you have this general who's fixated on a medical treatment. But somehow Chekhov brings them all together. It makes you think about human relationships, and like what we're all searching for.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. What do you think Chekhov's trying to say about all of this?
Well, I think those lost letters, they're more than just a way to make the story interesting, to create tension. They really symbolize this breakdown in communication, not just within families, but across those social classes too.
It makes you wonder, how many other voices are being silenced and how many stories aren't being heard because of these barriers.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's Yefimia and her outburst, that raw emotion. She's trapped in a marriage that doesn't fulfill her. It's like a glimpse into her frustration.
It's almost like her homesickness is a sickness itself, like it's eating away at her. Some kind of spiritual ailment.
Wow. That's a really interesting way to look at it. And remember, Chekhov was a doctor. He understood illness, not just the physical kind, but the emotional and spiritual kind, too.
So it's more than just missing home. It's like this deeper suffering, this yearning for something she can't even put into words, almost like she's lost a part of herself.
Exactly. And this brings us back to the general and his charcot douche. It seems like a small detail, but Chekhov was great at using little moments like this to reveal something bigger.
So you're saying there's more to this charcot douche than it seems?
For sure. Think about it. The general's having this treatment with water, jets of water spraying on his body, and water is usually a symbol of cleansing, right? Purification, renewal. And the general's fixated on it, so maybe he wants some kind of inner cleansing to wash away his worries or his past.
That makes sense. But how does this connect to Euphemia?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting, that charcot douche. It's a metaphor for the kind of healing that Euphemia needs, maybe even her whole family. It's like washing away all the sorrow and regrets and those missed connections and starting fresh.
Yeah. But the story doesn't really have a clear ending, does it? Like, we don't know if they'll ever find that healing or if they can fix those relationships.
That's the thing about Chekhov. He doesn't give you easy answers or happy endings. He makes you wrestle with these questions about relationships, about human nature, and whether people can change.
I see. So it's up to the reader to kind of decide what happens next.
Yeah, in a way. Chekhov invites you to think about your own experiences, your own longings and letdowns, and to see if maybe you can find those moments of grace and connection in your own life.
It's like he's saying that even when things are hard and your heart is broken, there's still hope. Maybe not the way you expect, but the possibility is always there.
Maybe that's all we need. Knowing that even though the world can be cold and uncaring, people still search for connection, for meaning, for love. And that makes it all worth it.
That's beautiful. We've talked a lot about symbolism and themes, but what about Chekhov's writing? What stood out to you about how he actually wrote the story?
Well, his attention to detail, it's amazing. Every little thing he describes, every gesture, even the words he uses, they're all carefully chosen. It makes the story come alive for the reader.
Yeah, you really feel like you're in that tavern.
Exactly. And the dialogue, he's so good at capturing how people really talk, you know?
Yeah.
Those pauses, repeating themselves. The way people don't always say what they really mean, it's all there in his writing.
It's so real. Like that scene with the parents trying to tell Yegor what to write in the letter. They're stumbling over their words. It's kind of awkward, but it's also heartwarming.
I love that scene. And even the humor in the story, it feels natural. It comes from the characters. It makes this sad story feel a bit lighter.
It's like Chekhov saying that even when you're sad or you miss someone, there's still room for laughter and joy, for those little moments that make us human.
Exactly. And that's why his stories are so powerful. They capture the whole human experience, the good and bad, the happy and the sad. And he does it with such compassion. It makes you feel understood.
He's saying, hey, this is life with all its ups and downs. Just embrace it.
I love that. Chekhov's stories are a celebration of being human, with all our imperfections and contradictions.
You've given me a new appreciation for him and his writing. I kind of want to go back and read at Christmas time again, like with fresh eyes.
You should. I think every time you read it, you'll see something different, some little detail or meaning you missed before. That's what's so great about literature. It keeps giving.
Okay. We've covered a lot today about Chekhov, the historical context, the symbols, the deeper meanings.
Yeah.
But there's one more thing I wanted to mention.
Oh, what's that?
We've been talking about reading this story, but there's this amazing audiobook on YouTube.
Oh, yeah. With Frank Markopoulos.
That's the one. And his voice is, well, let's just say it's very soothing. It brings the story to life in a whole new way.
I agree. His voice is so calming. It's a great way to experience the story.
You should definitely check it out. It's the perfect way to relax and really let Chekhov's words sink in.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into At Christmas Time, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, for me, it's a reminder that we all need to feel connected, and we need to find ways to close those gaps between us, whether it's physical distance or social barriers, or just not understanding each other.
It's also a reminder that even when you're feeling lonely or disappointed, there's still hope. We can find healing. We can mend those broken relationships. It might not be easy, but it's possible.
And I think most importantly, it reminds us that even when the world feels cold, there's still beauty in those small moments, in sharing our lives with each other. You know, it's amazing to me how this story was written over 100 years ago, but it still feels so relevant today. Like at Christmas time, it just gets at those things that we all feel, right? Longing, connection, trying to figure out what it all means.
It's true. And that just shows how talented Chekhov was. I mean, he was able to capture what it means to be human, like those desires and struggles that we all face, no matter who we are or where we come from.
So for our listeners, maybe they're reading this story for the first time, or maybe it's been a while. What do you hope they'll take away from at Christmas time?
That's a good question. I think even when things are hard, even when you feel heartbroken, there's always that possibility of healing, of finding your way back to each other. It might not be easy, and it might not happen the way you expect, but it's always there, that potential.
That's a nice thought, especially around the holidays.
It is, isn't it? And I think Chekhov also reminds us that even though we might feel alone sometimes, even though things separate us, like distance or social stuff or just not getting each other, we're all connected. We're all human.
And you really feel that in his writing, don't you? Like that empathy he has for all his characters, even the ones that mess up. It makes you want to connect with people, to break down those walls between us.
And to appreciate the people we already have in our lives.
Yeah.
Those relationships that we sometimes take for granted, to really cherish them.
So to wrap up, let's leave our listeners with something they can do, something inspired by the story. What's one thing they can do today to make those connections stronger? In their own lives, I mean.
Ooh, I like that. Okay, how about this? Call someone you haven't talked to in a while. It could be family, a friend, someone you used to know. Even a quick call or a note or just a text. It can make a big difference. It shows you care.
That's great advice. And you never know, right? That one little gesture could lead to something much bigger.
It could, couldn't it? And that would be a beautiful way to honor Chekhov's at Christmas time, I think.
Absolutely. Well, that's all that we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into At Christmas Time. We hope you learned something new, and maybe you even feel a little more connected to the people around you. Until next time, keep diving.
Please subscribe to this YouTube channel for more great content like this. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on all the fun and informative videos coming your way. Thank you so much for your support.